Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him. So welcome. As we begin, I invite you, if you're at home, to close your other windows or apps. If you're here, to silence your phones. For both groups, let's take a deep breath and center ourselves for worship. We begin by calling forth and honoring the people who made each of us, our biological and spiritual ancestors, teachers, and guides. We call forth those who imagined and made this congregation possible and who have sustained it up to this present day. And we open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all together may one day know full justice. The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and Unitarian Universalism is the church of the open mind, the church of the loving heart, and the church of the helping hands.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Kate Heilig. My pronouns are she and her, and I am blessed to be your worship associate today. We welcome you to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church, live stream and in-person service. And Accotink is a welcoming and inclusive congregation that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. All are welcome here in this justice-seeking, earth-healing community of faith. You are welcome here, no matter whom you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or backgrounds, no matter your means or abilities, you are welcome here in this religious community. If you are new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our Reverend William Levwood, or one of today's greeters using the chat box or out in person. On our website, accotinkuu.org, you can check the online order of service on the worship section. While you are there, be sure to check our events page for upcoming virtual gatherings and other news. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our virtual coffee hour immediately after this service and other things going on today. We're so delighted that you have decided to join us today. Welcome. And now a reading from Lily Percy, host of This Movie Changed Me. She writes, "The Wizard of Oz is one of those iconic American movies that is referenced by several other movies, and also, according to the Library of Congress, is the most seen movie in movie history. But in case you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, here's what's going on in the movie. There's a little girl named Dorothy, played by Judy Garland, her dog Toto, and a tornado that has just hit the farmhouse in which they live, somewhere in Kansas. They're transported to this magical land where witches exist and the great Wizard of Oz rules all over the land. And Dorothy and Toto follow the yellow brick road toward Emerald City to try to find their way back home. Along the way, they meet a scarecrow that needs a brain, a tin man that's missing a heart, and a cowardly lion who wants courage."
Such an iconic movie. It occurs to me as I listen to that description how much the heartland, how much that Kansas comes to represent America. And yet this home that Dorothy is whisked away from could be anywhere. In fact, in the movie version, The Wiz, Dorothy is whisked away from Harlem. Wherever we are is just a little slice of reality and is our home. The Wizard of Oz was published, can you believe it, in 1900. The film was released in 1939, notable for its use of Technicolor, a new technology at the time. It was moderately successful when it was released. It actually lost money, though, because it was so expensive. It wasn't until it was re-released in 1949 that it really started to catch fire. And its first broadcast on television was in 1956, which is where I imagine most of us saw it for the first time. Not in a theater, but lounging on a couch in a living room with our family gathered around us. Marketing entrepreneur Seth Godin describes that very experience on the podcast, This Movie Changed Me. He says, the movie begins in black and white and sepia tones, and then transfers to color. And as somebody who didn't grow up with color TV, that was an extraordinary thing. But mostly, he tells us, my memory is that feeling of safety with mom and dad and my two little sisters sitting in our house in Buffalo, New York, watching this miracle happen on the television in front of us. That sense of home, both in the watching of the movie on television at home and in the movie itself, is at the center of The Wizard of Oz. Film critic Roger Ebert points out in his review of the movie, for kids of a certain age, home is everything, the center of the world. But over the rainbow, dimly guessed at, is the wide earth, fascinating, terrifying. Ebert says that this is the central experience for a child of a certain age, but I believe it's something that never fully leaves us. We need a home, a relatively safe place, whether that's our actual home or not. I know some of us didn't grow up in homes that were safe, but we need somewhere that is a safe place as a child and throughout our lives. Now, as we get older, if we're fortunate, more and more of the world comes to feel like that, comes to feel like home. We become more comfortable in a wider and wider sphere. But some parts of the world remain over the rainbow, remain both fascinating and terrifying. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is lifted, quite literally, out of her home, out of her normal life by a tornado, and finds herself in a fanciful land, a place that, unlike home, she doesn't know anything about. She doesn't know the most basic things about where she is or how to conduct herself, what the rules are of conduct in this fantastical world. And she's quite alone in this unknown place, with only her dog, Toto, to accompany her. And immediately she's faced with challenges. I remember my coming of age. In fact, I remember more than one period of coming of age in my life that were like this. It felt like I had been lifted off to an unknown place and left there to fend for myself. Now, these experiences tend to be particularly intense, particularly technicolor, we could say, when we're young. In childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, perhaps that first day of kindergarten. That was a big deal for me. I missed the bus to go home. Got confused, didn't get on the right one. Or perhaps you think of that period of junior high school. For me, that was a time when I was figuring out who I was, and the social structures and friendship groups that I depended on were shuffling around and changing, kind of like a tornado in a way. I remember also when I went to college, the hugeness of the University of Maryland, just how many people there were and how I clung to my connections with my high school friends, emailing them often, which was actually a pretty new technology. I had to go to the email library place to do that. I didn't have my own computer. So there are all these moments of leaving the proverbial Kansas, of leaving home, that are particularly intense in their technicolorness. And sometimes those happen, particularly if there's a tragedy in our adulthood. But I have to confess that the world has never entirely stopped being an unknown place that's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. And that even in small moments, we're faced with that, crossing over that threshold into that fascinating but also terrifying experience of leaving home, metaphorically, and stepping into a space or being thrust into a space over the rainbow. And when we're in that space, it can feel like we're very much alone. And sometimes in truth we are. So we search for friends along the journey, just as Dorothy does, who finds these in the form of the scarecrow, the tin man, the lion, who help her on the journey on that yellow brick road, on the journey to the Wizard of Oz. And in return, she helps them too. We all need friends like this. Friends who become our home on the journey, become a kind of mobile home that travels with us. And for many of us, that's what this congregation is. And I hope for those of you who are newcomers that that's what this congregation becomes for you. And for those of you who've been here for many years, I hope it becomes that more and more, or in new and different ways as you journey together. We've all been through a kind of journey to Oz through the pandemic. It's unique because often these journeys to Oz we take by ourselves, and then we look for friends along the journey. But this one, the pandemic, we've been in it together. Not necessarily having all the same experiences, but all having that experience. And there's been a road of sorts, a yellow brick road. We could say it's meandered. It's taken turns we didn't expect, but we knew somewhat where we were going. We had science to follow, guidance along the way. It occurs to me to wonder what really makes a home. What makes this congregation a spiritual home beyond belief, and why does that matter? So I think we can look to the Wizard of Oz and also to those chalice lighting words that we've been saying for a clue to what makes this congregation a spiritual home beyond belief. I think there's three things. I think that we're like the Tin Man searching for a loving heart, for connection, for support along the journey. That's what our third principle talks about when it says that we affirm and promote acceptance of one another and the encouragement to spiritual growth. That we're going to journey together, accepting each other wherever we are. Come as you are, you will be accepted here. And then we'll journey together. We'll grow together. We'll support each other in soft ways and in challenging ways. I think that experience of connecting from our loving hearts is a foundation for trust. And that though we make covenants, Our principles are actually a covenant. They're named as a covenant. This practice of connecting from our loving hearts is the practice of covenant. No matter what other promises we've made to covenant together, the practice of being there for each other and journeying together is the practice of covenantal living together. So that's one thing I think that makes a spiritual home beyond belief. Another thing that's particularly unique about a Unitarian Universalist congregation is those open minds that the scarecrow is looking for. Exemplified by our fourth principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which we've found through our history is equal parts free and responsible. And I think that's also a foundation for trust in a community. Because when we come to the world with an open mind, and we know that others who are gathered with us are coming with that open mind, we can trust the process. We can trust that learning will come. If we don't know where we're going, if we don't know the answers, if we haven't figured out what's true or how to make meaning in our life, we know that it can be revealed through the process. That like the scientific method, we can continue to experiment, we can share notes, we can partake of the wisdom of those who've gone before us, and we can trust that process of learning because we open our minds, because we continually open our minds to new learning. And last, there's that cowardly lion, bit by the mouse, curled up in the corner. We are called to take courageous action together, to use our hands to be helping hands. I spoke a little bit about this before, that I think that helping hands, it kind of suggests charitable giving. And the problem with charitable giving is that it doesn't necessarily involve the people that you're wanting to help. There's a phrase from the disability community that says, nothing about us without us. And we're beginning to talk. We'll have a meeting, the Social Justice Committee, in a few weeks to talk about mutually liberating partnerships as we move our justice efforts more towards mutually liberating partnerships, towards a relationship where we courageously enter in solidarity with the people that we want to help, and we're helped at the same time, just like Dorothy and her companions help each other along the way. There's a clue to that in our fifth principle, which talks about democracy and the right of conscience. The deeper levels of democracy are not just about the majority winning, but about the people who are most directly impacted by any particular thing having the most say about that thing. And the right of conscience is what calls us to be courageous, calls us to stand up, to show up, to be there, to speak out on behalf of ourselves and others. And I think the fact that we're committed to that courageous work of justice making, of reimagining justice as well, that's also a foundation of trust. And together, these three things make this place a spiritual home beyond belief, meaning that open-mindedness that so many beliefs are welcome here, but also meaning beyond belief, like beyond our imagining, better than we could have imagined, which is not to say that we don't make mistakes along the way, but that we commit through covenant to grow together through those mistakes, that we commit through covenant to remain open in our minds to learning new things when we make mistakes, that we commit to be courageous and vulnerable when we make mistakes, so that we can continue to journey together, so that we can continue to call this a spiritual home beyond belief. Now, at the very end of the movie, our travelers are told that they always had what they were looking for. The Scarecrow already had intelligence, the Tin Man already had empathy, compassion, and kindness. The Cowardly Lion already had courage, and by this point, we've seen them exhibit these things. So I believe for us, this is both true and not true. We do have all of these things, some of us more and some less, some of the qualities more and some less as individuals. We have the ability also for all of these things. So even if we need to grow our courage, for example, we can grow that courage. So I want to invite you to ask yourself this morning, which of these qualities are you needing the most in your life right now? Do you need to open your mind to new horizons? Do you need avenues for expressing and feeling the love in your heart? Is there some courageous action that perhaps you've been avoiding that you need to take? What if you tell yourself that's just a small mouse? It'll be okay. You're up to the task. You might also ask yourself, what companions do you need on the journey? Because that mouse might seem very big, might be very big. So who is there, perhaps even gathered in this community, who has the wisdom of an open mind to share with you that you can learn from? Who here can be a source and a model for a loving heart? Who can help instill courage in you through their own example of taking courageous actions? I know these things are happening in this community all the time. So I invite you to open that. We're in our pledge drive. This is another way that we share our gifts with each other. So finally, I invite you to ask yourself one more thing, which is, what gifts do you have to offer this community right now? And is it in one of these three baskets? Are you called in your life right now to be a source of love and support, a loving heart for someone else? Are you called to be that open mind and a mind-opening presence for someone else? Are you called right now to lead others to take courageous action in the world as we move towards bringing more justice into our world? The wizard says that the power was there all along. He tells Dorothy that you had the power to go home at any time. And we chose this theme, and we'll continue with the services to go deeper into these questions of the loving heart, the open mind, courageous action over the next few Sundays. We chose this theme for this month, for this pledge drive, because we're coming back together, because more of us are in person, because we can gather outside, as we'll do soon, and enjoy fellowship together. But I also want to point out that we've already been clicking our heels and saying there's no place like Accotink. There's no place like our spiritual home beyond belief. We've already been journeying together through Oz, supporting each other, bringing our open minds, our loving hearts, our courageous spirits together. And I don't think we could have made it through this journey without that. So thank you for all the ways that you've covenanted together and journeyed together through Oz. It's not over yet. It isn't ever over. And so we'll continue to journey together in love, in hope, and in courage. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Though we will extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we have kindled, the light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out into the world. I invite you now to join me in our community blessing with these words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
There's no place like a spiritual home beyond belief. There's no place beyond a spiritual home beyond belief. I forgot to click my heels the first time. There's no place like a spiritual home beyond belief. It's a joy and a pleasure to travel with you, with our loving hearts, our open minds, and our courageous spirits.